Welcome to Ames Public Library for Beyond the Lawn, Lightning Talks for Biodiversity at Home, brought to you through a partnership with Ames Public Library and Seeds of Sustainability. I'm Megan. I'm the Adult Services Manager here at the library. The library's mission is to connect you to the world of ideas, which we do through diverse and inclusive resources and programs. We invite you to join us at future programs, which you can learn more about through our Page One newsletter or our online events calendar. And of course, consider checking out the books and other materials related to today's topic before you leave. This presentation is being recorded to be posted on the library's YouTube channel later, just so that you're aware. Each of our speakers will present for about 10 minutes and respond to questions related to their presentation. And then at the end, all three will be able to respond to whatever questions you may have for them. Because we're recording this, I will bring a microphone around so that we can capture your questions in the recording. And with that, please give a warm welcome to our three speakers, Dr. Matt O'Neill, Katelyn Rinicker, and Liz Calhoun.
So I lost the coin toss. I get to go first. Thank you, Megan and Ames Public Library for inviting me out to kick off our event here to talk about pollinators. I'll do a little bit of introduction to explain why somebody like me is at an event like this. Are you able to hear me okay? Is this okay? And for the recording, is this picking up all right? Great. So my name is Matt O'Neill. I'm a Wallace Chair for Sustainable Agriculture at Iowa State University and a professor in the newest department at Iowa State University, the Plant Pathology, Entomology, and Microbiology Department. I'm an entomologist by training, hence me being in a plant pathology, entomology, and microbiology department. I was originally hired about 20-some years ago because of this beast that you see on the screen. This is the soybean aphid. This is an invasive insect that has arrived in the United States in 2000 and spread around the Midwest where soybeans are grown, and kind of fundamentally changed how we grow soybeans, in part because before this beast arrived, farmers didn't typically use insecticides on soybeans. Soybeans aren't native to North America, and when they were brought here from Asia, they escaped all the insects that attacked them, more or less. But when the aphid arrived, things changed. And so farmers started using insecticides applied to seeds, like you see here in this picture, and then a lot more insecticides were applied to foliage, like you see in the picture as well. My job was to find out how best to manage these pests without using insecticides all the time. And one of the things, oh shoot, that was weird. Sorry about that. One of the things we found was that inside soybean fields, there's a lot of insects other than pests. There's beneficial insects like this lady beetle that contribute to the mortality that aphids experience. And as we were spending a lot of time on our hands and knees counting the aphids and tracking the lady beetles, we noticed there are quite a few of these. And this was interesting because this was not our goal to see these bees in soybean fields. And soybeans and corn are crops that do not require insect pollination. So our farmers who farm 80-some% of the land in Iowa don't need these, but they're there. And most of the honey that we enjoy in the Midwest is because of honeybees taking nectar from soybeans. It's a combination of soybean and clover. So that's me. And that's how I came to start working with pollinators at Iowa, because they were there. And as we're using insecticides, we're starting to get concerned that they're having an impact. A little bit of fun going on outside. Sorry, those of you at home missed that. So what's the problem? Well, sure, you can find bees, but historically, we're seeing declines in their abundance and diversity, and that's not limited to Iowa. That's a global phenomenon. And in a paper published in Science in 2015, a group of entomologists and ecologists formed what my colleagues who are honey biologists call the 3 Ps hypothesis. There are 3 sources of stress. There's pesticides, which include insecticides that are commonly used in crops like soybeans. Those seed treatments neonicotinoids, and there's an interaction with fungicides. There's parasites and pathogens that are a source of stress. And for honeybees, that can be things like varroa mites. But I don't think it was an accident that Golson and their colleagues put the final P up here, which is poor forage, at the top. Because without the food that these bees need to survive, these other stressors are kind of secondary. And for those of you who have lived in Iowa, and I can't imagine anybody drove outside of Iowa for tonight, but if you did, you probably already know what's in this figure. You know that Iowa is dominated by crop production. This is a figure produced by the USDA showing by county how much of the land is used for agriculture. And as you get darker shades of green, you get more and more of that land committed to agriculture. I think statewide, it's something like 85% of Iowa is used for agriculture. Some 70% of that is for corn and soybeans. So that might leave you wondering, how can bees survive? And do they survive at all? And this was a focus of a project that a group of us did at Iowa State University, in part with funding from the United Soybean Board. Even though soybeans are self-fertilizing or self-pollinating, there has been some evidence that when they're visited by bees, their yield goes up. So you can imagine that soybean growers would be interested in this. On the flip side, because we see bees visiting soybeans and soybeans using insecticide, the biologists and the beekeepers are interested as well. So with help from a honey biologist, Adam Dozal, who's now a professor at University of Illinois, we tried to answer this question. So how did we do that? Well, we selected soybean farms in central Iowa, and we brought little apiaries. And apiaries is a term that beekeepers use to describe their bee yards. At each one of the farms that we picked, we've dropped a pallet of 4 honeybee colonies that you can see in the picture. We brought them from a central location where we started them all at the same size and took them out to soybean fields and then tracked the bees' use of the soybeans, both in terms of their visiting the flowers or the plants, and then also the hive's growth. And growth in a hive is measured in terms of how many bees are there, but also how much weight the colony puts on. And by July and August, that weight is primarily honey, which is typically harvested here in Iowa in August. So what did we see? Well, here's a little bit of data from our experiment. The y-axis is the mass of the colony minus all the equipment. So this is either the bees or the honey. And then the x-axis is the time that we were tracking the bees' growth. So we put them out in June and we watched them survive and grow. And that growth is them foraging on clover and soybeans out in the field. And so this was kind of hopeful. And, you know, there are quite a few hobby and sideline and even some commercial beekeepers in the state of Iowa. I think it's estimated there's something like 30,000 hobby, sideline, commercial beekeepers in the state. So this is something that they know. They know they can get a crop of honey. And they know that they need to get the crop by August, because then they know this next thing, that by August, those colonies start losing weight. And that is not in terms of the number of bees, but that's in terms of how much honey is in the colony. We didn't harvest the hives. We just let them go and see how they behaved. By October, there was a 53% loss in weight. And that's disturbing because that weight, that honey, has to last them through the winter and into the next spring. So there's a little bit of a feast here when soybean and clover are present, but after those crops are gone, it's a famine. In part because Iowa lacks late summer forage. Some of you are nodding your heads going, yeah. So then the question is, if that's the problem, is there a solution? And you might look for a solution in Iowa's history. Before European settlers arrived, some 80 to 90% of Iowa was tallgrass prairie. And typically when we think of tallgrass prairie, the name grass sticks out, and we know bees don't visit grass, but hidden in that prairie, and not very well from this picture, are 40 plus species of perennial flowering forbs that provide a season-long, summer-long buffet of flowers that bees can use. And some entomologists at Michigan State, about almost 20 years now, investigated individually those plants to see how attractive they are to native bees and to honeybees. So why am I telling you this? Well, a really clever graduate student at the time, Ashley St. Clair, said, if there's a famine going on, if those colonies are losing weight, and so that's shown here in the y-axis, in August, they start to lose weight. Well, what if we provided them a taste of that buffet? So she took a group of hives that she kept at a soybean field, and as they started to lose weight, she moved them to a prairie. And those hives, after she moved them, the weight loss stopped and they started to gain weight. So she coined this the prairie rescue effect. And honeybees aren't native to North America, but they're a well-studied insect that can give us some insight as to how all bees and pollinators are behaving. And if honeybees, even with the beekeeper providing them help, are suffering in this way, it gives us some idea of what our native bees might be experiencing as well. So then the question is, where can we provide honeybees and other pollinators this season-long buffet that used to be in our prairies? And that's a question that a group of us, not just my lab and biologists, but a bunch at Iowa State have been asking, where we can practice conservation and crop production at the same time. And this has resulted in a practice that's now sponsored by the USDA called prairie strips. This is a conservation reserve program practice that landowners can get support to take a little bit of land out of production and put prairie back in. And that's what you see here. You see a bit of a watershed here where a farmer is growing soybeans on a corn soybean rotation, and they've taken out strips of that crop and put it in the prairie. Now, this was intentional. Oh, sorry. That means I'm talking too long. I'm gonna have to speed up. So this is a practice that was designed to capture sediment and nutrient coming off the field, but it also offers biodiversity and forage for things like bees. So how good is the solution? Well, we compared this. We kept bees at farms with prairie strips and those without. And there are other features in the landscape that bees can use, like roadsides and grass waterways, but those don't compare as well to our prairie strips. We have this high diversity of plants. So this is what those prairie strips look like compared to the control. So this is the number of flowers that we found from early June through August. There's this explosion that occurs. What did it look like for the bees? Well, these are what the bees look like at a control site. Each one of these towers is a colony of bees, and we add boxes to those towers to give the bees room to store things like honey. This is what it looked like at a control site. There's 4 towers there for the 4 colonies. This is what it looked like in August at a prairie strip. Each one of these has an additional box to provide the bees the room to store the nectar and pollen that they're collecting from that prairie strip. That ended up being about 24% more honey. And so now we've gone from oh, that was weird. Sorry about that. But we've now been able to recommend this to beekeepers, and we're exploring if this is a way that beekeepers can improve upon the sustainability of beekeeping in the state of Iowa by working with farmers who have put these practices in place to provide ecosystem services. And in addition to honeybees, we see more native bees. This has been work done by Mary Harris, Matt Liebman, and Farnaz Korbach. They've found a large community of native bees that use prairie strips. They're able to find them in those crop fields. And for those of you that are here, there's a small collection in the back of the room. You can take a look at some of those bees that we've found. Many of these do not have common names. I think right now we're at about 300 species that have been documented in the state. Some of them are just left with the scientific names. So to end, and I apologize, I'm a recovering extrovert. I tend to talk on, but I'm going to wrap up really quickly here. I want to leave you with, well, what can we do? So some of the things I think we've learned from our work is we need more native perennial flowering vegetation in our landscape. And yeah, farmers and landowners can do this at a large scale using practices like prairie strips, but you don't have to be a farmer, you don't have to be a landowner to make a difference. One way that we're exploring this at Iowa State is looking at a practice called agrivoltaics or ecovoltaics, coupling solar farms many of which are coming online now that are occupying 10, 100, maybe even 1,000 acres, planting some of that native perennial vegetation under and around those. But again, not all of us are solar farmers, so we can do this at home. This is a picture from my front yard. I have a little patch around a crabapple tree where I planted one of those species that makes up those prairie strips. This is a cup plant. This is what it looks like in May, kind of slowly developing. Here it is in late June, maybe early July. And then by August, it's brought on that flowering vegetation that we especially need after our crops are gone. And I think this is outstanding. It's, I mean, literally outstanding. It's about 8-10 feet tall. And when the blooms are up, there's a constant stream of bees, including bumblebees, visiting those flowers. So using native plants, even in our home gardens, can have a huge impact. And the Ames Library has a bunch of books describing how you can put that in place in your own home. So to finish, one other thing you could help is with citizen scientist projects like the Bumblebee Atlas that just started this year. We're asking citizen scientists, maybe like yourselves, to go out and give us some idea of what bumblebees are out in our landscape. And if you want to learn more about anything that I talked about, our Prairie Strip site is there. Our Bumblebee Atlas site, you can sign up if you want to participate in that. And if you got a little taste for the solar stuff, we have a website that describes that as well. Sorry that I went over. Thank you very much, and I'll stick around and answer any questions. But our next speaker is... Oh, should we take time for... I'm sorry if I went past. If I
You're good. Don't apologize.
Yeah. So the question, just for people at home, was how important is it to have native flowers for conserving pollinators? That's a really good question. If your goal is to conserve and bring back the abundance and diversity of our native bees, then those native bees are probably going to need the native plants that they co-evolved with to thrive and survive. Some of them could be very specialized. They will need just those plants in order to fully establish. Some can be more generalist, feed on a bunch of things other than what was native. But to fully get back to what we had, we're going to need to reconstruct that native habitat that was here before Europeans arrived.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, for those of you at home, please, they're standing up. It's embarrassing, but we're gonna move on. Yeah.
Hello, I am Katelyn Rinicker. I'm with Prairie Rivers of Iowa, and I'm the pollinator conservation specialist there. I am presenting on the Ames Pollinator Friendly Community Plan. It's a 10-year plan that Ames has developed in partnership with us. So, as far as we know, we are the first city in the United States to create an official 10-year plan, which is very, very exciting, and we're glad to be a leader in this. We have areas that we want to hit. It's education, policy, research, and partnerships. And our vision statement is to become a leader in developing and sustaining pollinator habitat that will enrich the quality of life of the human and biological communities in Ames. We also want this framework to support the pollinator communities and address food insecurity, ecological health, offset the impacts of climate change, and serve as an example for other cities around the world. We want to be this leader that everybody can look to, and we can help other cities also make pollinator plans because they are so, so important. So our first goal is to have native habitat. We want to increase the number of households that have native gardens and pollinator plants by 50% in these 10 years, and we want to double the current amount of native pollinator habitats. On public properties in Ames and the urban fringe areas. We're going to identify and connect city and public green spaces to create pollinator habitat corridors. Because if you think about a native garden as an island, each island needs a bridge connecting it to the next. Otherwise, these pollinators that can only fly so far won't be able to get to the next island. So what can you do? You can plant native plants that provides an abundance of nectar and pollen. These native plants are great for our native insects, like some of our native bees. We have roughly 400 species, and we have native butterflies, 110 species of those that are native, and we have over 2,000 native moth species that are pollinators. So all of this is helping them. Some of them are specialists, which means that they only go to specific plants. They only feed on those, or they only lay their eggs on those. You might know the monarch butterfly, which uses the host plant milkweed. And so that's a specific pollinator then. They're actually more low maintenance, pest free. They can help controlling your runoff and water, and they will native plants will help help your soil erosion as well. And this also helps us create those spring, summer, and fall spots for nectar and pollen as well. So you can also leave your leaves. This means you can leave them on all over your yard. You can rake them into a corner. This is where pollinators like moths and a couple different butterflies will lay their eggs. Their larvae will live over winter. Sometimes they'll hang out and hide from predators in them. And we want to avoid shredding them because that's also shredding the eggs, and that's not helping anyone. Wait to do your yard cleanup because they haven't yet emerged in the early spring before you clean up those leaves, and tell all your neighbors how important this is. So our second goal is abundance and diversity. We want to support pollinator species, especially those that are imperiled and endangered, specified by the federal, state, and research authorities. So you can do this by becoming a citizen scientist. You can do this by downloading iNaturalist. This is where we, the Ames Pollinator Group, is getting most of the data from around Ames. We're hoping that people will use this. It's an app that you can download. You can upload photos of all of the pollinators and really anything you want ID'd that is natural. And then other people will come in, log onto the website, and they can tell you what it is. They can ID it for you, which is really fun to go on and see, oh, well, this is a honeybee, or this is a pale purple coneflower, and it's native to Iowa. You can also download and use the Ames Butterfly Checklist, which has about 40 common species that unfortunately have become less common now that their numbers have been declining. I also have this checklist over on the table over there if you'd like that. So a healthy environment is our third goal. And this is really just hammering back on that neonicotinoids and using less pesticides. Neonicotinoids actually disrupt the nervous system of insects, and they paralyze them, and you will actually, if you see them, they'll be like shaking, and it's really sad. It's not great. And when these neonicotinoids are on these plants, they make the whole plant unusable for beneficial insects. So that means the pollen, the nectar, the leaves, the petals, all of it will become toxic to beneficial insects. So what can you do? You can reduce your pesticide use. You can minimize your turf grass, which means less chemical pollution, as well as your water usage is being distributed better. You have more biodiversity. Your carbon footprint is lower, and your soil is going to erode less as well. You can also use integrated pest management, which most of us would think is common sense, but sometimes it's hard to see that happening nowadays. We can manage it using this IPM method, and that actually becomes the most economical, least hazardous, and better for the environment kind of practices. And this can be huge scale with agricultural, or it can be a small scale with a couple of plants in your garden. So our fourth goal is to raise awareness. That's why I'm here today. We want to let everybody know that the Ames pollinator friendly plan is something that we can rely on and we can all work together to make it happen. We need the public's help to accomplish our goals together. Spread the word, tell everybody, tell your neighbors, tell your church, tell your school, tell everybody you know, tell the person you bumped into at the grocery store. Everybody needs to know about this. And we can also support farmers and nurseries that are transitioning away from pesticide use by buying things from them instead of other ag practices that are still using pesticides. And you can also join the pollinator committee. You can talk to me or have a sign up back there if you'd like to join us. So, and then here's the Ames Smart Watersheds rebates, which Liz will talk about more in depth, but I wanted to connect them to the pollinator plan. They have native landscaping rebate forms, which can help with your pollinator gardens.
Thank you, Katelyn. Does anybody have questions about the pollinator plan specifically? Okay, perfect.
I have. So in one of the slides you mentioned about leaves and leaving them.
Is it only during spring, or is it, when the trees shed their leaves in fall too?
Yeah, so in the fall, we want to leave our leaves because that's when they start laying their eggs and the larvae will start hiding in there. And then we want to leave them throughout until later spring to pick them up so they've emerged from them.
Are there any particular species of trees or grasses that would be higher yield to keep intact over the winter?
As far as trees go, a lot of them are great for beneficial insects in general. I know that oaks, I believe the number is about 400 species. It helps with insects at least. So oaks are super awesome, but all trees are great and they provide that protection from rain coming down or just them hiding in the bark or getting food from the tree.
Okay, any other questions for Katelyn? All right, beautiful. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Liz Calhoun. I work for the city as a stormwater resource analyst, and I'm happy to be kind of giving you an overview of our rebate program, specifically kind of narrowing in a little bit on what we've talked about tonight with native plants. Yeah, and hopefully you can take some of this information now that you're inspired by the previous two presenters, that maybe you can take these rebates and apply for a few of them and yeah, implement some of these practices. So currently we have 6 rebates. We've had the rain barrel and composter for quite a while, soil quality restoration, which is a lawn improvement. We have the native landscaping rebate, rain gardens, and our newest one is the native trees. Here's a summary of the applications through the years. You can see that we started with the rain barrels and rain gardens back in 2008, and then progressed to implement some others, add some others as the years went on. And then again, the most recent one in 2019 was the native tree, which actually came out perfect with the derecho hitting in 2020. We had our rebate in full swing. So a lot of people were like, oh, just lost a tree with a derecho. So they went ahead and used that rebate. So that one's definitely caught on quickly. Now I'm going to dive down a little bit into the individual rebates a little bit. The rain barrel, the criteria for that is it has to be a minimum of 50 gallons in size. You're eligible for up to 2 rain barrels per year. It can be either a kit. Some people will just buy a kit and then find a barrel or something that they have and retrofit it to make a rain barrel out of it. Or it can be a pre-made barrel that you can just install and put it to use. And then our rebate amount on this one is it's $100 per rain barrel or $200 total. We up that to try to, we used to just have it be one, but we thought these fill up so fast, so we're trying to get capture more water. The composter rebate, where you can take your leaves and kitchen waste and turn into compost. That one has to be a minimum of 40 gallons or 5 cubic feet. So it's generally the ones that are outside, not the little kitchen composters, but the ones that are outside that you'd store outside your house. And again, these can also be manufactured or homemade. Some people will take and buy the material and build a compost bin out of the material. So it would be eligible for that. Up to $100 is rebated. And this one is a little bit special because all the Story County, most of the Story County waste from outside of Ames and in Ames goes to our resource recovery plant. So even some people outside of Ames would be eligible for the composter rebate because their trash comes here. The next one is the lawn soil quality restoration. And this helps to increase the health of your yard. A lot of yards are very compacted from mowers going over them. Sometimes in some of the developments, the soil is very compacted from the time they built the house. The soil under the sod was laid very flat and compacted. So this helps to increase the health of the soil under the lawn. It's a 3-step process where you come through and do a deep tine aeration, which is a piece of equipment as you see in the picture right here. You can rent these or you can hire a contractor to do it. And what that does is it pulls plugs out of your lawn and helps to get it opened up so it's not just a thick thatch. So once you have those holes, then you put a 1/2 inch of compost over top, spread it real thin, and then you overseed it with some grass seed. So this helps to increase the health of the yard. It reduces the need for watering. It helps the water to infiltrate into the ground. So it helps our overall stormwater system. Yeah, so it's got many benefits, and we find that people that do this, their yard is generally a lot greener. You have less need for fertilizer because the compost will act as a fertilizer. So there's multiple benefits from this. The reimbursement covers materials, equipment rental, and labor costs. And this has a one-time eligibility, so it's more or less a one-time thing. Native landscaping, this is kind of the focus of tonight. So some of the criteria here would be that you need to have at least a 100 square foot minimum area, which is only 10 by 10. It's not a very big area. You would just design it, submit the plant list with your application and design. This also has a one-time eligibility. So we encourage people to try to make the most of that, like do as much as you think you're going to do and apply for it. And the rebate amount is up to $400 for the typical residential lot. And again, the rebate covers the materials, mulch, weed killer. It also does cover, if you hire a contractor, it would cover that cost as well. And besides native plants, you can also choose to convert your lawn to a native turf. That the native turf is more of a warm season turf, so it won't get as green early in the season. But when everyone else's yard is drying out, it thrives. It likes the hot summer days, hot and dry. So that's also an option for this rebate, is for a native turf. When you're thinking about doing native landscaping, there's a couple things you just want to check before you finalize it, before you do your design and submit it. You want to make sure if you do have an HOA and you're with your property, you want to make sure that it's allowed, that sometimes there's rules and regulations within the HOAs. You might have to get an approval for what you want to do, so it's consistent with your neighborhood. And then there's also a new city ordinance that you want to make sure you'll be in compliance with. And that is primarily making sure that there's safety issues at intersections and next to the curb, that you're still allowing people to open their car door if, if they're parked along the curb. So you just want to make sure that you're allowing for those things. This was a map here in the middle that we started inventorying last year as part of the pollinator plan. We started inventorying all the native landscape areas that we could find by driving down the streets and alleys. We didn't do a thorough survey or anything, but you can see that the older parts of town, there's a much higher density of native, what we could identify as native landscaping. So we see that there's a lot of potential in especially the newer parts of town, but it was really encouraging to see that older part of town, how people have really started to embrace the native landscaping. And we found also that it doesn't have to be your whole yard. You can do a lot with just small areas and really try to increase the habitat for pollinators. The next rebate would be the rain garden. And this one is a little more complicated, and it doesn't get used a whole lot because it requires more work. You have to identify a location where you could put it, where the ground would allow enough infiltration. So we require that a perk test or percolation test is done, where you dig a hole and you put water in it, and then you want to make sure that the water disappears, because we don't want to have standing water at that location. You want to be able to make sure it gets in the ground within a couple days. You have to identify location down from your downspouts where you have impervious area, either from your downspouts or your driveway. So it takes a little bit more design. A lot of times people will hire a contractor to help with that. Some of the local landscape contractors can do that. And it's a two-step process. So first you would submit the design and plant list with the application, and then we'll take a look at it and see if it all works, if you have the percolation rate that you need, and then we'll approve it. And then you'll go ahead and do the work, and we'll reimburse you for up to $500 for a typical residential lot, and for larger lots up to $1,500. Native trees. So yeah, like I said, this is our newest one, and it's really taken off, and it's up to $100 per tree and 2 trees per year. So you could apply every year for this one. We really feel like trees are an answer to a lot of things with our climate action plan and stormwater in general. So this one, the reimbursement includes the tree, the mulch materials, and rental equipment if there's any equipment needed. And we also like to just remind people that they would need a street tree permit if you're going to put it in city right of way. So this is kind of the general criteria for all the rebates. The applicant must be a property owner. So I've had the question before, like, well, can renters apply for it? And what we tell them is you need to get your property owner, your landlord on board. So the property owner is the applicant. But then there's also homeowners. Besides homeowners, there's HOAs, businesses, churches. They're all eligible to apply. We're finding that some HOAs are catching on to this, and then they spread the word to other HOAs. And so we talked about it, and we decided to increase the rate for those HOAs and churches, larger parcels. If the lot is greater than 20,000 square feet, then they can apply for up to 3 times the rebate. So in essence, if for like the native landscaping rebate, if it's $400, they can actually get up to $1,200 for like church. We've had churches and several HOAs apply for this, and you can get a lot done for $1,200. Then after you submit the application, we actually, 30 days. So the 30-day criteria is after you submit that, what is it, 30 days? Okay, so we want to make sure that people don't put this in and then 2 years later give us the application. So we want you to submit the application to us for reimbursement within 30 days of the installation. What we found is people are like, well, I did this and I just saw it in city side and now I want to get the rebate, and they don't have their receipt anymore. And it gets complicated. So we have the 30-day requirement. Yeah, again, here's the process. So 3 of the rebates have the one-step process where you make the purchase, you install it, and then you submit the application and receive reimbursement within 1 week to 2 weeks. 3 of them have the 2-step process where you have to design, you submit it to us, and we approve it first. Again, we just want to make sure first that we have funds available, because this is getting more popular. So we ran out of money last year. So we want to make sure we have funds still. And then we want to make sure it meets all the eligibility requirements. So we approve it, then you complete the work, and then you submit the receipts and photos of the completed work and receive reimbursement. And so it's a pretty simple process. Yeah, I hope this talk, what we talked about today, can help encourage you to maybe try one of these rebates. And we're just trying to get more incentives out there to have people try some of these practices.
All right. Thank you, Liz. Are there any questions about the rebates on offer? Oh, hold on. There's a hand up in the back.
That's really exciting. This is a very interesting program. I'm wondering, for somebody who's lazy like me, can I work with a contractor who I might kind of ask to do these tasks for me for my house and then apply for the rebate?
Yes, you can. We've had several of those recently for the soil quality restoration. That's been pretty common, where people hire someone to aerate their yard and then do the spreading of the compost, which can be a lot of work depending on the size of your yard, and then overseed. So we've had that one. They would all be eligible for hiring somebody, but the most common ones where people do hire contractors are the rain garden, especially because that usually requires excavation to dig out a depression, and so that requires the equipment. The native landscaping, we've had a few of the bigger ones, the churches, they have hired contractors. Most homeowners haven't, but the larger projects, they've hired contractors.
So does the rebate go to the homeowner who then passes it on to the contractor, or can the contractor file for that on behalf of the homeowner who hired them?
Yeah, good question. So it would all go to the homeowner. So the contractor would bill the homeowner, and then the homeowner would get reimbursed from the city. Yeah, so the contractor is kind of a third party. The homeowner would do everything, hire the contractor. We work with the contractor if they have questions about the specifics of the practice, but the whole application process would be through the homeowner. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Liz?
Do you have a list of plants, approved plants?
Yeah, I actually have, so the native tree list is on our website, and it's a general list. We do accept some trees that aren't on there. The native plant list is really, we just review it as it comes in, but I have a list back here, and there are some on our website. There's a lot of different plants you can put in, but yeah, we do have a list that you can start with.
And do you have like a list of people who have done projects, so people can go and see kind of before they get started themselves, or get inspiration from?
Yeah, that's a good question. We should probably add that on our application. Like, do you mind if we share? We haven't done that, so I would probably ask a few first, but I think we probably need to take that next step and try to get people like now being that example. Because I think a lot of people are they're hesitant to do it like without, yeah, sometimes that social aspect of getting them over the hump, like, to take that step. Like this wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be to, have someone explain them to them. But that may be something that we look at here real shortly to try to, and having more events like this too is where we're hoping we can get more people out. A lot of the people on the pollinator team have done some of this, and so they might be the first ones that would be willing to share how to, how it went. So yeah, those are good ideas.
Actually, it's related to his question. It's if you have templates for the projects would help a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, the ideas like coming from other people, but templates
Yeah.
would be awesome.
We have, I went to a seminar last spring, and Dubuque has a really good program that I'd like to kind of use as a sample. They actually, yeah, they do it. If we had staff, we would do something like this. They actually order all the plants all at one time. They do like economy of scale type things where they can really pull it all together, and they have a list and they say, these are the plants that we're going to have available. And then people can like sign up for it that way. So we'll get there. We're in the second year of this pollinator plan. So we have some of these big goals, and it's a 10-year plan. So each year we're going to make some progress, but yeah, it's a good idea.
And where can I find the native plants here in Ames? What nursery can I look for those plants?
We have it on our website, and it's getting a little easier, but they kind of come and go during the season too. We generally, there's a group that will grow them at Iowa State, and also like at Ryman Gardens, they do a plant sale usually in early May. And then there's also a group called the Community Academy, and they grew thousands of plants this year. This time of year, it's more difficult, like to get them locally. But then there's also some nurseries where you can buy seed, and that's still an option to plant in the fall, like late fall. You can put seed down. There's some seed that likes to be on the ground through the winter because it helps them to germinate. Then, like if there's snow that lands on it, and it helps the seed to germinate in the spring. So seed is an option as well. It'll take longer for the plants to grow bigger, but the larger plants locally will probably be hard to find right now, but springtime, some of the local nurseries have more.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mustard seed, they also.
Oh, yeah.
Table it,
Right.
They also do grading plants.
Right. Yep. Yeah,
They
usually.
sell those at the. But I'm not sure when they do that.
Yeah, usually May,
Yeah.
usually May, June. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Liz? Any questions for any of our presenters?
I have a question for Katelyn. So earlier when we were talking about leaves and leaving them out, is there a transition, program or recommendations as part of the Ames pollinator plan, strategies that people can implement? Because I know people still want to have turf grasses, and leaving leaves is not the way most people want to go for a turf grass that they just put up. So are there any strategies that the pollinator plan talks about? Essentially saying, this chunk, you can design it this way, and then leave the leaves all through like fall, winter, and then into the spring.
I'm not. Yeah, you might know.
Well, yeah, the plan doesn't really get that detailed. Actually today I just sent a couple social media posts over within the city. We're trying to just put that out there on social media to leave the leaves. And it's not like you need to leave all the leaves. It's just kind of like not cleaning them all up. So it's like leaving some of the leaves is kind of the approach that we're taking, but the plan doesn't really get that specific. It's kind of like every situation's a little bit different. And and we're trying to balance, like, if you leave too many, the leaves are blowing all the time this time of year, and so people have to be conscious of their neighbors and that kind of thing. So you kind of maybe find a place on your lot that might be a good place where the leaves are going to stay, and yeah, and we're trying to find that balancing act there with the leaves, but yeah.
All right. Thank you for our presenters. Please, if you're here, take time to look at the materials that they brought, look at the bees that Matt brought. They're very cool. And thank you so much for coming.